Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. We're starting off this season with a little different format. The first few minutes will be my guest speaking about the topic that we're going to be talking about. In this case, it's the opioid crisis in Vermont. And afterwards, when my guest is finished giving the summary of that crisis and what we can do about it, we'll be asking questions and answer period, and we hope you so enjoy the show. And my guest today is Ed Baker, who is a member of the Academy of Certified Social Workers and also the host of the Addiction Recovery Channel on CCTV VT. Great show, Ed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is great. This is a topic that everybody needs to hear about for sure, because it is a crisis, is it not?
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
It is a catastrophic crisis.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think things have changed. You and I talked about this a while ago, and I have a feeling with COVID and all the other things and all the disasters that have happened, it hasn't gotten any better. They've just stopped talking about it, I think.
That's exactly right. People, for various reasons, are concerned with a lot. There's a lot going on in everyone's life.
Right.
But it's reached the point now where everyone is beginning to talk about it again.
Good.
And rightfully so.
Well, because I was actually noticing that not too long ago, and I said, nobody's talking about opioids. I can't imagine it's fixed. Because we've got mental health issues, and well, we'll talk about all of that. I just want to tell you, Ed is a master-level social worker, and he's an activist and an expert in addiction health in Vermont since 1985. That's about right. He hosts and produces the Addiction Recovery Channel, which I talked about, and the show is fabulous. If you ever tune it in, you will be very pleased with the kind of guests that Ed has on and the conversations that are so open and honest. It's a great show, Ed. I've watched it several times. So thank you for that.
It's been a sheer pleasure. It has been a sheer pleasure to me.
Well, you certainly have your name well known in the community, and you're doing so much good.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously.
Pat.
So you, in May 2023, this year, you wrote an opinion piece titled, "We Have an Undeclared State of Public Health Emergency." And I would love you to summarize, as we talked a little while ago, about what prompted you to write this article. What are the steps? What can we do to address the opioid crisis? And how bad has it gotten over the years? So I'm going to let you fill us in, and we'll catch up with you a little bit later and ask some direct questions, okay?
Well, thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for the opportunity, and welcome to your viewers. Thank you for taking the time out to learn a little bit about what is the most pressing public health issue in Vermont. It is an overwhelming and a catastrophic public health emergency. It's undeclared, but that doesn't make it any less real.
Right.
I'm talking specifically about accidental drug overdose and accidental drug overdose death.
Huh.
I'm going to show a few slides, that will really give the viewing audience, a realistic view of what's happening. It's not easy to see, and it's not easy to understand or integrate the profound nature of this public health crisis. So this first slide, this is a slide that shows overdose responses by the Burlington Police Department. So this is all Burlington. So if you look at it from left to right, it progresses from 2012 to 2023. 2012, there were approximately 25 overdose responses in Burlington. 2023, if the projections are correct, and they will be, there will be just under 500 overdose responses in Burlington. If you look on the graph again from 2019 to 2023, you'll see an incredible velocity in the number of overdoses in Burlington. And that's what we're dealing with. Frankly, we're back on our heels about it. This is another slide that just depicts the same statistics in a different way. I think it's a little easier to see the gravity and the velocity of what we face today. The graph on the right, the light pink graph, that's 2023. That's overdoses in Burlington. Look at that compared to 2019. You know, it's incredible the speed at which incidences are occurring, the mounting volume of incidents per year in Burlington. It has both the police department and the fire department back on their heels. God bless them. They are doing an outstanding job at responding to this. There's been innovative responses developed by Chief LaChance and his department in Burlington. But still, the magnitude of this has to be faced. And as Pat was saying, we're not talking about it enough, and we need to really begin to discuss this as the priority, the health priority that it is. This is a heat map to July of 2023, so it's not even the full year, showing the incredible concentration of overdoses in Chittenden County. The great majority of them are in Burlington, that cluster of different colored circles. That's Burlington. That purple circle in the middle represents between 50 and 100 overdoses between January and July 2021. This is another heat map just to give you a little bit of more of a close-up, and this is through October of 2023. So again, that intense collection of overdoses in Burlington. Burlington is the hot spot in Vermont, and these graphs depict overdose responses, but they also run directly parallel with overdose deaths, the number of Vermonters and Burlingtonians dying of accidental drug overdose. And I'll go into that in a little while. This is fatal overdoses in Burlington and then fatal overdoses in Chittenden County. If you look at the top box, in 2023, there's over 2 deaths per month in Burlington. That's projected. It will be more than that. The numbers reflected in this graph don't reflect deaths that are still uncertified. By the beginning of next year, we'll have the full numbers. But as of now, it looks like there will be at least over 2 deaths per month in Burlington from overdose. These are preventable deaths. In Chittenden County, if you look at the bottom box, 2023, it looks like there will be approximately 6 deaths per month in Chittenden County. 6 deaths per month in one county. Chittenden County has the highest death rate in Burlington. And if you look at each box, if you look from 2021 to 2023, you'll see a clear progression, a clear worsening of these numbers. And these numbers progressing the way they're doing is in spite of a lot of activity that Burlington and Vermont has taken to intervene in this crisis. The short version is what we are doing is good, but it's not enough. It's not working. It's not reaching the people that are most difficult to engage. There are other things that we can do, that we have the funds to do, that we are not doing. And that'll be a major focus of what I have to say today, actually, what we are not doing. This graph is a literal, this breaks my heart, and it should break your heart too. In 2012, in Vermont, we had 50 accidental drug overdoses, 50. In 2022, by this graph here, which is a little, I think it's an underestimation, we had 243 accidental overdose deaths in Vermont. There's been a quintupling, a 500% increase in preventable deaths in Vermont in 10 years. When we see 2023, nobody likes to predict. I don't like to predict, but I'm not afraid to predict. In 2023, the number will approach 300. 300 fellow Vermonters dead from accidental drug overdose. This is the culprit. The culprit is fentanyl. Fentanyl is present in 93% of the deaths in Vermont. It's the same thing nationwide. Fentanyl, first time we detected fentanyl was in 2014. The Centers for Disease Control report, it was actually a footnote, mind you. There were 3,000 deaths in America associated with fentanyl in 2014. In 2023, according to Nora Volkov, the director of the National Institute of Drugs and Addiction, there were 77,000 deaths related to opioids, and almost 100% of those involved fentanyl. So from 3,000 in 2014 to 77,000, or almost 77,000 in the 12-month period from April 2022 to April 2023. That number is mind-boggling. This trend, this fentanyl is a deadly drug. It is not that people with severe opioid use disorder requested it, wanted it, pursued it, sought it, or even prefer it. It's what's called a supply shock. International drug cartels, international crime organizations developed fentanyl to save themselves money and increase their profit, and now it is the only opioid you can buy. It's the only unregulated opioid you can get in America. These people with severe addiction, are at the mercy of international crime organizations reaping the wildest profits imaginable off addiction, and we, as a country and as a state, are not doing everything we can to protect them.
Can I ask you something? I don't know if this is a fair... Why would the drug dealers, why don't they care if somebody dies? I mean, why would you make a product that could kill people? I find it fascinating. You know, when you go to business, you're a businessman. That doesn't seem to be a really good business model. To have your clients die on you.
Sure, that's a legitimate question, and it's a great question. I ask myself that question. Unfortunately, you cannot get a drug cartel, lord, in a room and ask them.
Right.
So we're not really ever going to find out. However, I'll tell you this, that the savings, and this is the gruesome, inhuman tact of these cartels. The savings in terms of growing, cultivating, farming, harvesting, processing poppy.
Right.
Opium poppy.
Right.
Tremendous amount of work, tremendous amount of person power, farmers, chemists, time, letting the crop develop.
Mature, yeah, right.
Huge bulk. Heroin is light, a big bulk. Transporting, smuggling, all the savings with developing fentanyl are indescribable. So what happens with fentanyl is these cartels, you can have a garage or a basement with a couple of would-be chemists in there with some of the precursor chemicals. It can take them a week or two to make a kilo or two of fentanyl. A kilo or two of fentanyl is worth 5,000, 10,000 kilos of heroin. So if a shoebox, is easy to transport, it's, incredibly more potent, it's easier to distribute, and the profits are maximized. So that is all that these cartels care about.
Right.
People in America who have addiction are now addicted to fentanyl. There's no heroin. A person with addiction who wants heroin now cannot even get it.
Oh.
There is none available. Oh. It's all fentanyl. And it's all for the profit of these multinational criminal organizations.
Wow. Well, you talked a bit in your presentation, and thank you for that, Ed. That was really great.
So basically, the bottom line is they don't care
Right.
if you die. They just want to make as much money as quickly as possible.
Right, because somebody will be right behind you.
And we need to protect our most vulnerable, and we are not doing them as best we can to protect them.
Right. I also could ask, and I'm sort of totally not following my questions here because this is very interesting. How does mental health is a big issue in Vermont.
Sure.
How does that fit in with all of this addiction? I mean, I don't know which feeds which. I mean, something must feed the other.
When you think of mental health, what I want you to think of, Pat, is inner world. Okay, so think of inner world. Think of suffering in one's inner world. So you have adverse childhood experiences, early adverse experiences.
Right.
You have many, many children in America who are brought up in situations, very, very unfortunately and tragically, where their inner worlds develop, where there's a sense of inner suffering and inner pain. Sometimes that manifests itself in different types of mental health challenges, inner pain. When a person has inner pain and they come across a solution to their inner pain, they will seek the solution to their inner pain. Inner pain could be a product of poverty.
Right.
It could be a product of racism, stigma, neglect, early adverse experiences. And no matter what the cause of it, it's inner pain. And when a person finds a solution to inner pain, they will seek that solution. What's happening in America, and what's been happening in America for a long time, is we have this ready availability of drugs. So a person comes across a drug, they take the drug, it manifests itself by soothing their inner pain. The brain, the human brain, is going to make note of that. Have no doubt about it. The brain will say, whoa, wait a minute. You know, that drug works on this inner pain. That usually is the way this begins. Then over time, what happens is addiction begins to develop. The person begins to take the drug more often than they would like.
Right.
They begin to neglect other activities. They begin to take different types of risks. Then there's other types of impairments in the brain. The person's ability to differentiate between danger and safety, to implement, what they call self-care behaviors. All these things are compromised when addiction takes over. And now the person is kind of set on a course of seeking the drug experience and taking unnecessary risks to attain the drug experience. And that becomes, it grows into addiction. Addiction never just starts like that.
Right, right.
It's a gradual process. It's an innocent process. And it's, unfortunately, as we see today, a deadly process.
Yeah,
and what happened in America, remember Purdue.
Right.
Remember, for decades, we were inundated with very, very powerful opioids, pharmaceutical drugs that had high addiction potential, when we were being taught by a very manipulative corporation that the same drug had a low addiction potential.
I remember that, and they were saying it wasn't addictive.
Yeah.
Same like cigarettes. I mean, they were
same thing.
Got a pattern here.
And for decades, the cigarette companies had experts and scientists saying they didn't cause addiction.
Wonderful, I love it. So you mentioned a few times in the slides, which were wonderful, that it's preventable. How is it preventable? Because we haven't done such a good job in this state.
These deaths are preventable. When you look at the Vermont social autopsy, you'll see that 76% of people who are dying from drug overdose have no contact with agencies or organizations providing help. So there's a whole population out there that is not getting help, that is not seeking help. They're the most damaged, and they're the most severely addicted, and they're the most at risk for death. We're talking about people, as we just mentioned, that have childhoods characterized by inner pain. We're talking about people that have been prejudiced against, that have been arrested, incarcerated. We're talking about people who have been, for years, Pat, persecuted, prosecuted, handcuffed, searched, and incarcerated as a product of the war on drugs. So you take drugs, you're a criminal, I'm going to arrest you,
Right.
you're going to jail.
Yep.
So these are people with medical disease that are being treated like criminals. Who would blame them for not trusting the system? So what's happening now is they're out there, they're taking drugs. The drugs are more lethal than ever before, so they're dying more frequently than ever before. The way we can prevent those deaths is by developing programs that reach them.
Right.
The types of programs I'm talking about basically come under the heading of harm reduction. What harm reduction means is you don't have to abstain from drugs for me to care about you. You need even you may miss a few appointments in a row, and I'm not going to kick you out of my agency.
Right.
We're not going to take your urine samples and scold you and punish you because you're taking drugs. What we're going to do is we're going to tell you, hey, you know what? It's okay for you to take drugs. It's okay for you to be just the way you are. We want you to come here, and you know what? We're going to help you to take drugs and stay alive. That's the point. We're going to help you to stay alive. While we do this, we're going to develop a relationship with you. And it may be the first caring relationship that you've had in your life for a very long time. But test us on it. Come see for yourself. Come hang out. Come talk. Let's get to know each other. Yes, you want to take drugs? We'll give you a safe place to take drugs, a clean syringe, or a utensil to smoke drugs,
Right,
if that's what you
right.
do. If you overdose, we're going to revive you. We're not going to call the police to investigate you, and we're going to continue to develop this relationship with you. We're going to keep you alive. And lo and behold, what happens, Pat, is these people who are now languishing in the shadows, living on the streets, who don't trust anyone, these people will begin to develop relationships with caregivers. I talked to the people down in New York, in On Point, New York City. They have social workers that come in. I'm a trained social worker, master's level. We were taught that you can't counsel anybody who's under the influence of alcohol.
Right.
You just can't do it. She's had social workers come in that are pushing the envelope. They're engaging people while they're taking drugs, while they're under the influence of drugs. They're engaging them in helping relationships. The statistics are showing that On Point, New York City, 75% of their participants that participate, in a consistent way in the center are referred on to additional health promoting services. 75%.
Wow.
Okay?
Because
So-
they want to change, right? Is that what's happening?
If we can
Yeah,
engage
yeah.
them.
Right.
But how can you engage them if they think you're going to arrest them?
Right, right.
This war
And
on drugs
criticize
has
them.
to be lifted. There
Yeah.
has to be, I like to call it unconditional safety. You'll hear a lot about, they have to hit bottom. They have to be so miserable. So much, they have to suffer so much pain that they're motivated to get better. This couldn't be further from the
Right.
truth. We have 111,000 Americans
Wow.
that died between April 2022 and April 2023. 111,000 fellow Americans that died from accidental drug overdose before they hit bottom. They didn't hit the so-called bottom yet.
Right.
That this comes from the Harrison Act. It was 1914, I believe. The Harrison Act said that it's illegal for a physician to prescribe drugs to a person with addiction for comfort. We don't want to make you comfortable. We want to let you suffer until you get motivated. This has got to go out the window. It doesn't work.
Right.
We have to give people unconditional safety, make them feel that we love them, we care about
understand
them.
That makes a lot of sense, Ed.
And then they tend to, I'm one of them, I know from my own experience. Then you begin to take risks with getting better.
Right. Interesting. So our legislature last year passed H.222. Were you involved with that? Because it was a bill that supports the state's approach to reducing the rate of overdoses and blah, 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 and talking about what we were just speaking about, access. And is that going to work, that bill?
It's a great bill.
Is it?
It's a great bill. It was Dane Whitman, who is a member of the opioid abatement committee.
Right.
I've sat with him. I go to those meetings as a public
Right.
observer. It's an open meeting. I've seen him many times. He was, I guess, the prime sponsor of that bill,
Right,
along
yes,
with,
right.
with other people in the legislature. And it pretty much follows the recommendations of the opioid abatement committee. There was $7 million that were allocated toward basically 100% harm reduction. Every dollar from that initial cycle of the opioid abatement committee was earmarked for harm reduction. So all the
So
services.
they've gotten the message a little.
They've gotten the message. They've gotten the message because of advocates, staunch, consistent, intense advocacy shaped that committee's values and made it so
Great.
that money was spent on harm reduction. And that's what needs to keep happening at that committee. The sad thing, and this goes to a state of a public, a declaration of emergency, because the sad thing is that under like the conditions we have now in Vermont, it's like regular, nothing new. We've got all this money, but it's going to take 2 years for it to hit the street.
Right.
Every one of these items in H2022,
Right.
or almost 100% of them, none of the money has been spent yet.
Great.
We know that we need methadone.
Right.
We need like little sub-clinics in the Chittenden County area dispensing methadone and elsewhere.
Well, they're
This has
asking
been
people to carry methadone with them in case they come
Well,
up.
that's Narcan.
Oh, no. Oh, you're right.
But
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Is methadone
Yeah,
is like
right.
buprenorphine.
Right.
It's a medication for opioid use disorder.
Right.
We need to distribute it. We need to have these hublets, they call them. It's been passed by legislature. We have the money to do it. It's not going to happen for 18
Right.
months
Wow.
because of federal guidelines, because of state bureaucracy. It's not going to happen. And if there were an emergency declared, a public health emergency, we could get through some of that red tape
Right,
and do things
right.
in an emergent way and save some lives. So H222 was great, groundbreaking, revolutionary, a step forward, but
A little faster, right?
a little faster
Right.
would save lives. It's not saving lives yet. The other thing about this committee, the Opioid Abatement Committee, is that it screeches to a halt when it comes to overdose prevention centers. And this has been a manifestation or a reflection of Governor Scott and I believe Dr. Mark Levine's
right.
adherence to political policy. I have some quotes here. Can I read them?
Sure, absolutely.
This
Go
is
right
from
ahead.
Dr. Levine's, memorandum to the legislature
Right.
requesting the allocation of $7 million for harm reduction, which again was revolutionary. And my deepest congratulations to the advocates that shaped that and made that happen.
Right.
Make no mistake about it, the advocates made this happen. Dr. Levine says, and this is true, the inescapable conclusion and prevailing sentiment have been to fund harm reduction and treatment engagement at this early juncture. Inescapable conclusion, prevailing judgment. Okay, that was the advocates. He goes on to say that it concerned the committee that 75% of opioid overdose deaths occur in people who have no prior connection to the treatment system. This is the population we're talking about.
Right.
So we've got to get out there with harm reduction.
Right.
He says the committee and the department agree that strategies should be creative, bold, thoughtful, cutting edge, and rapidly implementable, and evidence-based whenever possible. In keeping with this philosophy, the committee wishes to better understand the scientific underpinnings behind overdose prevention centers. He says it in writing to the legislature. It took 8 months of advocacy to get experts before that committee to testify before committee members.
I was going to say, when you and I interviewed Dr. Levine a couple of years ago when we did those opioid videos for the state, he wasn't talking that then. So you must have done a great job between that time and now to kind of get him on the bandwagon.
It's unrelenting. It's unrelenting. It's the advocates. And again, my heart goes out to the advocates. It's been hard. But he's saying what he has to say.
Good for him.
It's in writing. It's been to the legislature. Now, because of the advocates, we've had the experts before the committee. And this is the crucial point, Pat. And I'm going to go back to this, in my talk with you. The crucial point is this committee is meeting again December 22nd, and overdose prevention centers will come up. So, we've got it in place, but there's resistance. There's resistance, and the resistance is coming from the administration, from the Scott administration, and filtering down. Now,
can I just ask you, how are the centers supposed to work? I mean, where the addict comes to the center, or how can it be a prevention if they're not there? I mean, I don't know how that would work.
Say it again.
Okay, I guess the name of the centers are the addiction prevention?
Overdose prevention centers.
So what are they there for to protect the overdose? Do the clients come in and talk about, tell them they need help? How does that work?
Well, first of all, there's a little under 200 overdose prevention centers currently operating on the globe. 14 countries, or 15 actually, because Scotland just added on. I'm just going to read the countries.
Yeah, please, because I'd like to get an
Australia,
idea.
Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Iceland, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, Ukraine, and the U.S. in New York, now Glasgow, Scotland. So this is a movement that is accepted globally. We just haven't gotten there yet in Vermont because of political policy. The political will is not there. The way they work is, like, we'll take the one in New York. They have two. One in Harlem, one in Washington Heights in New York City. It's a center. It's a building with offices. They have booths with tables, with mirrors, with shades for privacy. A person comes in, they have drugs. They don't supply any drugs. They will supply a sterile syringe to the person. They'll help the person get set up. The person will self-administer drugs. They will observe them. If they overdose, they will revive them from overdose. The way they do it in New York is very sophisticated. This is something that a lot of people don't really know. Like, we hear a lot about Narcan, naloxone. Naloxone is a blessing, believe me. It saved thousands of lives in Vermont. But in New York, what they do is they use oxygen. Only in extreme cases will they use naloxone. They use oxygen, they keep oxygen in the bloodstream. The person is seen through the event and recovers from the event gently with oxygen. They can counsel them, they give them a room to recover in, they take care of them. In some cases, they will use naloxone, but it's very, very sophisticated. They will teach people safe ways of injecting drugs, safe ways of wound care. They will teach them safer ways of self-administering drugs. Not only are there no deaths at the actual overdose prevention center, but the areas around the centers see a decrease in death. People don't only inject drugs or use drugs at overdose prevention centers, they will also use them in their communities, the same person. But what they've learned is safer ways to do it from the people at the overdose prevention center.
And what's the resistance here? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Carry naloxone. Don't inject drugs or use drugs alone. Always have someone there to revive you. There are different ways to increase safety.
Excellent.
They will teach them that. So it's people who they have records of this at On Point. People who were overdosing, say, 5-6 times a year, are now overdosing a lot less than that because of what they've learned safe ways to self-administer drugs. plus they're engaged in other health promoting services.
So what's the objection from our administration? Just because we're setting up a place for them to get
Well,
high, or what?
it was H728. There was a bill. It was in last year, focused on a response to overdose, and part of the bill was to establish a study group
Right.
on overdose prevention centers that would report back to the legislature. Governor Scott vetoed it.
Huh.
He vetoed it. And his reason, to go to your question about
Right.
reasoning,
I'm just
he
curious.
said it didn't make sense to really divert money from scientifically proven strategies to something that, we don't know if it works. So
Lots happening in the world on
how
this,
much
right?
how much money would it take to have a study group?
Right.
It's his value system and his prejudice against overdose prevention centers that caused him to veto that bill. If he hadn't vetoed that bill, Vermont would very likely, I would say 100% likely, right now at this point, be set up to immediately create an overdose prevention center, because the study group would have looked at science. There's over 100 studies on these groups, on these overdose prevention centers, that all support them. We would have been in a place now to immediately open one. We don't know when we can open one now, but it's, that kind of, I don't think the governor really understands what an overdose prevention center is, and I think his commissioner of health is not educating him. So we're kind of stuck at this point. There are realistic impediments. One realistic impediment is the Department of Justice, is looking at overdose prevention centers in a very unfavorable way. And it's something called the crack house law. There's a law from, the late 1900s,
Right.
that when people were making money by having an establishment in a neighborhood where people with addiction could go and buy drugs and take drugs, a crack house.
Right.
So you have a landlord,
Right.
you have dealers, all making money
Right.
on people's addictions, and it's illegal. So this crack house law was passed to prosecute that, so it wouldn't happen. Okay, that's okay. An overdose prevention center is not a crack
No, right.
house.
You've got people there to watch and protect, right?
It's exactly the opposite.
Right.
But the Department of Justice is in litigation with a place in Philadelphia about this. The Department of Justice is kind of stalled on it. But it's a realistic concern. So I ask you then, why is it that New York City has On Point, and it's been open for 2 full years now, the Department of Justice has stepped back? Rhode Island has legislation in place. They're going to open 2 overdose prevention centers. The legislature has backed it. That's going to happen in 2024. The Department of Justice hasn't done anything. There's legislation been introduced now by Taylor Small in the House, and there's other legislation too in Vermont that will provide for immunity from crack house law. If that legislation can pass, if we can establish immunity in Vermont as a state, then the administration will have less of an argument against overdose prevention
Well, there must be a
centers.
lot of statistics if it's all over the globe.
There are
You're mentioning so many countries.
Hundreds of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
When Mary Claire Kennedy, a renowned researcher from British Columbia, came and presented to the Opioid Abatement Committee, she said a lot that I remember, but one thing she said was profound as far as I'm concerned when it comes to saving lives. She said without the system of overdose prevention centers that they have in British Columbia, their deaths would be 2.5 times higher.
Wow.
250% higher than they are right now without that system. So you cannot debate that these centers save lives. The other thing I would like to add, while I'm talking, and I just think this is incredibly important for people to understand, that none of this is a panacea. America, we have gotten ourselves behind the 8 ball we are in major, major trouble when it comes to public health.
Right.
And that's not news to you. I know you know it, I know it, but people need to hear it. This has to be a long-term, consistent
Right.
effort where resources are spent because people are worth it. And what happens
That's
is we like to think, we really like to sit back and think that we beat stigma. Oh, now we say person with drug use disorder. We don't say junkie. Well, that's language.
Right.
Stigma, Pat, is alive and well, and stigma is influencing the process.
Right.
Stigma is holding this back. And it's a shame. If any other population were dying at this rate, if you knew 300 whatever
Oh, for sure.
were going to die in 2024, what would you be doing?
You'd step up and do something. for
300 kids under 5 are going to die in 2024
Right.
from blank, blank, blank. You're going to do whatever you can to
Right,
make it not happen.
exactly.
300 people with addiction are going to die in 2024? It's a little bit of a different
Right.
story. I hate to say it, but it's true.
I can see how you're saying that for sure.
Yeah.
I can see. I just wanted to ask you, you talked a little bit, I mistook and said Narcan. Is that something we all should have? They keep promoting that we should all be walking around
Yes.
with Narcan.
Yes.
Is it easy to administer?
God forbid you don't have it.
Well, I was thinking, I've been thinking positively about it, but I don't know how to use it. Do they tell you, is
It's
it
a
really
spray.
easy?
It's a spray.
Right in the nose?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
a spray, and anybody can administer it. You get instructions with it. You should
Right,
read it.
right.
If you see a workshop on it or a video on it, that's
do
even
it.
better. But you don't have to be an expert. That's the beauty of it.
That's
and
great.
I can't tell you
Because they're
how
giving
many.
them out free. Just take it.
Yeah, that's one of the major advances in Vermont, like the widespread availability of naloxone,
Right.
the enactment of what's called Good Samaritan laws.
Right.
So you don't have to be afraid if you're on the scene and someone unfortunately dies and you
Right.
try to revive them. You're not going to get prosecuted of anything.
Right.
It's a Good Samaritan law, which really makes it more likely that people will respond.
Yeah.
A lot of times, what used to happen is something would happen, there'd be an emergency, and everyone would be afraid they're going to get arrested.
Well, exactly.
So nobody says anything. So
Somebody with the camera takes a picture of you, and you're like, oh my God. I know that last summer there was a summit held at the Essex Fairground entitled Coming Together, I can't even say this word, a Substance Use Addiction Summit. There were a lot of people in attendance, I heard. You were there. What was the focus of the summit, and do they all get this, what you're talking about? And is that where the advocates are coming from, this group? Or
Well, I have to say yes and no. Like the summit is a beautiful event. It's the second year I went. I went the first year, and I was shocked because of the beauty.
Oh, great.
And I will go every year. The second year was even better. It's a gathering of people from all over Vermont that are in various different fields.
Right.
So education, prevention, treatment, medicine, harm reduction, advocacy, hundreds of booths.
Right.
And everybody's there, and everybody's networking and just feeling good about being connected. It's a beautiful event. I would highly recommend it.
That's good.
But it's not really focused on creating momentum or advocacy for what we're talking about. Dr. Levine spoke, and he gave a good talk. A few other people spoke. Dawn Tatro,
Oh, really?
spoke.
Yes, actually, I looked at the list. Somebody sent me the agenda.
Yeah.
Great speakers,
Yeah.
great workshops.
Yeah.
Great.
Workshops. They had the Christian group, Teen Challenge, was there.
Nice.
So it's really kind of like an informal networking that goes on. It's rejuvenating for people, and I would highly recommend
great.
anyone's attending.
That's great. So what do you see in the time we have left here? What should we be doing now? What's next for this effort? And how do we get to the goal line?
Certainly, you're alluding to H22. H222
222.
was appropriate.
Right.
We have more naloxone coming online.
Oh, you think this year there'll be more legislation for sure, huh?
I think that I'll just go over some of the provisions. Well, maybe we don't have to do that. there will be a lot of good things happening this coming year when the money allocated from H222 finally hits the ground and begins to affect our reality. So that's good. But as I was saying, what's happening is even with our best efforts, people are dying at accelerating rates.
Right.
And it's because we're leaving out a crucial, immediate, efficacious intervention. God bless you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Overdose prevention centers. There is no two ways about it. This has to happen, Pat.
Yeah.
And it will only happen, I believe. One of the things that will help it happen is if a public health emergency is declared.
Right.
Now, I've been given permission by Tanya Vahovsky, Senator Vahovsky, to stay on this show. That she's sponsoring what's called the General Assembly resolution.
Yep, right.
You're familiar with that?
Right. Oh, sure.
So it's a resolution passed by both the House
Right,
and
and
the Senate. And it will be declaring that the number of overdose deaths in Vermont by accidental drug overdose constitutes a public health emergency.
Good for her.
No two ways about it. Public health emergency.
Right.
Tanya Vahovsky, and I'm sure there are other sponsors.
Yep.
So this is a General Assembly resolution. That resolution then will be sent by the Secretary of State to Governor Scott and Commissioner Levine. So they will have the state of Vermont
Right.
basically declaring this is a public health emergency. And, you know, we think that, I can't see them not declaring a state of public health emergency.
Well, it'd be hard to vote no, I'll tell you.
Okay, so what happened is we saw during COVID, we saw Vermont click right into a great job.
Yep.
I mean, we did a great job.
We can move when we want to, can't we?
We did a great
Yes,
job.
Right.
So it's going to take that. We can do a great job with this too. We can do a great job with this too.
Right.
We can have, people say overdose prevention centers are not going to work in a rural state. Well, you know what? Burlington is not a rural state.
Right.
Burlington is a city.
And I'm sure, like, Rutland's got the same issues.
There are a
You
number-
focused on Burlington, but there's some other places
There are a
in this
number
state.
of places in the
Yeah,
south,
right.
southern end of the state, that come in right after Burlington in
Right.
terms of numbers of deaths. There are ways to adapt overdose prevention centers, mobile units, virtual contact with people, or virtual monitoring of people. There are all kinds of very sophisticated things being developed. We have money, Pat, tens of millions of dollars flowing in, rightfully so, from the Purdue,
Right.
Sackler, the distributors. We have money coming in for 18 years, 17 years, thanks to T.J. Donovan.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
TJ, our beloved TJ, a real fighter, and he won. He joined that class action suit, and now we
Yep,
have
he
money
did.
coming in, and that money is because people died. People died of overdose. It has to be spent. It cannot be spent on prevention, primary prevention. It cannot be spent on that. It has to be spent on saving the lives of people
great.
most at risk for death. We can afford a system of overdose prevention centers adapted to the locality, funded by opioid abatement money, and we can really begin to make a dent. It's not a cure-all, but we can make a dent in this crisis. I want to point out one thing because I have to point this out.
Yeah, no, please do. We've got 5 minutes left, so
This
go
is
right
a
ahead.
sentence in Dr. Levine's letter,
Right.
his memorandum to the legislature asking them to allocate funds. Second half of a sentence. I'll read the whole sentence.
Yeah, no, please, go ahead.
He says, the inescapable conclusion and prevailing sentiment have been to fund harm reduction and treatment engagement at this early juncture. Then he goes on to say, and as increasing settlement dollars become available in subsequent years, to then strategically allocate funds to prevention programming and initiatives. I have been at every meeting. I have reviewed the minutes, and there is video record of every meeting. He says the inescapable conclusion, and he includes that line about prevention as being part of an inescapable conclusion. The second half of that sentence never happened. It never happened, but it's in writing.
Right.
Somehow that the Opioid Abatement Committee has agreed that they're going to allocate money to prevention rather than harm reduction. This has not been, this is not, this, I don't know where this, I challenge Dr. Levine.
Right.
I challenge Dr. Levine to show me where and when in the deliberations of the Opioid Abatement Committee there was an agreement that funds after a certain time would go to prevention.
Wow.
And this is what I mean when I say that this is a public health process that is influenced by politics.
Oh.
And it's unacceptable. People are dying. Close to 300 will die in 2023, and that number will continue to increase year after year, as it has since 2010. Okay, we have to do something different.
And I cannot tell you how impressed I am with your passion and your knowledge, and you are a true advocate for these people, and I think it's going to be an interesting legislative session coming up, isn't it?
I think it is. I'm excited about it.
We have to watch it, and I think we'll have some of these folks on the show to talk about it. And Tanya,
should.
I know her, and we'll have her come on and talk about the joint resolution.
Yes.
That'll be great. Interesting to see what happens with that.
Yes.
It's such a I'm sorry, but it's a little complicated for those of us who are not involved, thank God, in this area. But thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you for listening. I appreciate it, and I hope you get interested and involved. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Thank you.